Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Double Waved Yellows podcast. This week we are talking about the 2021 Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. Joining me alongside in the commentary box for a jam-packed podcast, we have a jam-packed commentary box. We have Tyson Bain join us, we have Hodders, and we have Prae. Tyson, I'll come to you first. We've got a lot to talk about today.
Oh yeah, hell of a lot to talk about. So much happening in that race.
And Hodders, it wasn't just at the front of the field where we had a lot of the action. It was also all through the midfield as well.
It was indeed. It was one of those races where it wasn't a foregone conclusion till the checkered flag.
Absolutely. And Prae, we have seen something very, very rare, a Lewis Hamilton mistake.
Yeah. A Lewis Hamilton mistake and a one that is normally a Merc screw up on pit stops.
Well, as I said, we've got a lot to discuss, but first of all, let's take a look what is coming up. So coming up in today's podcast, we are going to review the race from start to finish. We're going to go through each of the 20 drivers, analyse their race weekends. We're going to be taking a look at the steward's office and analysing all of the penalties that were imposed, and there were quite a lot that the stewards were busy with this weekend. We'll have a look again at who were the winners and spinners, who had a weekend to remember and who had one they'd rather forget. And also we've got a fair few talking points as well. So let's get started. The Grand Prix headlines. Verstappen wins a chaotic race. The race was red flag after a huge crash involving Bottas and Russell. Hamilton, as we mentioned, bizarrely making a mistake, spinning off in the wet and rejoining. Norris, a cracking weekend for him, finishing third for McLaren, his second ever podium, and 5 drivers were given penalties, including, very rarely, 2 stop-go penalties. Tyson, I will come to you for the first headline. Verstappen, superb race, very clean.
Yeah, absolutely. Well deserved as well. Didn't put a foot wrong apart from just one tiny little mistake.
Yeah.
Other than that, you can't fault him.
Absolutely a fully deserved win. Hodders, we obviously will get into this in some detail, but we've just been watching the highlights back, and that crash involving Bottas and Russell was quite a big one.
Yeah, it was a very hairy one. Look, I mean, that was the first time I'd seen it as well, having had moving in things and not see the race itself on the day. But yeah, that was quite the crash, and I'm not surprised it was red flagged. Yeah,
red flag, because obviously with all the debris across the track and also damage to the barriers. Prae, Hamilton spinning off in the wet again. We've just watched the highlights back. It seemed a really odd mistake for him to make.
It does seem like an odd mistake for him to make because Hamilton is prolific in the wet. He seems to do really well in the wet, but what it's just seemed like is he carried a little bit too much momentum headed into what is effectively the hairpin of the track.
Yes, Toza, the hairpin, yeah.
Toza, yeah. It just seemed like he carried a little bit too much momentum, and maybe the wheels decided to lock up. Who knows? It is a really, really odd kind of mistake for Hamilton to make.
I think the irony was that actually he was in the process of lapping Russell. I think basically everyone was on the drying line, and he's put his wheels onto a semi-damp track. And unfortunately, if you're on dry tyres when you're trying to do that, there's only one place you're going to go with that one. Tyson, a superb drive from Norris. He could have easily actually been higher had he had the better grid start, which obviously we'll go into in a bit more detail. But either way, a very clean race for Lando Norris.
Oh yeah, brilliant race for Norris, and he's probably my favourite personality on the grid right now, so I was thrilled to see him get such a good result.
And finally, Hodders, a lot of penalties been handed out, lots of stop-go penalties, drive-throughs, some stuff that we don't often see in Formula One races.
Yeah, some of the penalties we saw were incredibly rare, and we'll be getting into that later on, but the stewards must have had an absolute field day.
Well, so they were kept fairly busy on their toes from the word go. So let's have a look at each of the drivers, and we'll go through the results. So first of all, the race winner, Max Verstappen. So qualified third, won the race, led pretty much every lap with the exception of the pit stop sequence. But as we alluded to, he very nearly spun the car off when preparing for the restart after the red flag. Tyson, I will come to you first on this one. I think Verstappen was quite easily our driver of the day on this one.
Oh yeah, easily. As you said, led the whole way, just the pit stops, and recovered nicely from that little mistake. It could have shaken anyone else.
And Prae was a very odd mistake, and it's one that could have had very serious consequences, not just for Max, but for the drivers behind him as well.
He almost spun off the track. Luckily enough, he was to keep it on the track. But if he had spun off, Leclerc would have been allowed to pass him, and that would have changed the kind of dynamic completely. Because who knows, Verstappen might have been gone into some of the battles, might have lost some of them, and been forced a little bit down the grid. Obviously, we know it's Verstappen, but a lot of things could have gone wrong by that spin.
And presumably he would have been under the same rules as Raikkonen, which we'll get into in a bit later, in that he would have basically had to have retaken his position, so basically passing Leclerc, but he would have had to have done it before the safety car line, which was very, very close, or he would have had to have gone down the pit lane and waited until everyone else had gone past. So he would have been down in about 16th or 17th, so a bit of luck there. So second in the race, we'll come on to Lewis Hamilton. Now, Hodders, considering Lewis started... considering Lewis, he started from pole. He was having a fairly good race. I mean, he got passed legitimately by Verstappen into the first chicane, but then spun off lap 31 from second place whilst lapping Russell. He rejoined ninth and a lap down, and by sheer fortune, the lap after there was that big crash where the race was stopped, and he was actually able to regain that lap. He was actually able to go past safety car and back round to the back of the pack. So very fortunate there, Hodders.
Yeah, I think it was very lucky, considering the wing damage he sustained from that spin as well. That red flag and restart essentially, I think, saved his race. If it weren't for that, I don't think we'd have been talking about him being on the podium right now.
And he also got fortunate that not only climbed back up to second place, but also the fastest lap, which gives him the championship lead by 1 point. Incredible. Formula One fans, driver of the day, third position, Lando Norris, qualified 7th, but it could have been so much more. Prae, he actually set the third fastest lap time in qualifying 3, only to have it deleted for a track limit violation. Made a poor start, but what was really good, he had the team orders. Ricciardo let him through, and then passed Leclerc on lap 35 at the restart for position 2, and understandably Hamilton got past him on his storm through the field. Prae, just a really good weekend for Lando.
Now, I can praise Norris to no end because he's literally my favourite driver on the grid right now, but he had a fantastic drive. Yeah, shame about the qualifying, getting that third place time but having deleted for track limits. But it's just a superb drive from him. Honestly, such a superb drive from him.
Yeah, and Prae, we also saw he was quite good about it on his social media posting after qualifying. So look, it's my mistake. It's not, we'll just see what happens on Sunday. And he's managed to channel it so well into such a good result. And I think it's fair to say on a normal race weekend, or on a normal race, sorry, he wouldn't have beaten Max or Lewis.
I don't think he would, but that McLaren has a lot of power in it, and he has a lot of pace. We'll have to see next race in Portimao, but we'll have to see. That McLaren's been quite positive so far. So
yeah, very good, solid weekend for Lando. Position 4, Charles Leclerc, qualified 4th, finished 4th. He passed Perez at the start. He's basically had a very quiet race through to 4th. Tyson, not really much to write home about for the Monegasque driver.
He had a very good race, very quiet race, which is pretty much all you can ask for. And Ferrari, they're doing a lot better than they were last year.
That's a very good point as well. And position 5, following up his teammate Carlos Sainz, qualified 11th and finished 5th. Gained 3 places at the start and a really good battle with Stroll and Norris. He was up to 5th at the restart, and then Hamilton took him on lap 50, finishing P5. Hodders, I think Tyson sort of covered it there. It's a solid weekend, nothing to write home about, but Ferrari are getting good competitive finishes.
Which is exactly what we hoped in the preview of the season. We hoped would happen, is that Ferrari needed to get their act together. In the first few races, they've already proven that they are starting to get the mojo back.
Mm-hmm. And on Ferrari home soil as well, for good measure as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't do better in Italy than a Ferrari good performance.
Absolutely, it's what the Scuderia, the Tifosi would expect. Coming in 6th place, Danny Ricciardo. I think it's right we should sing Ricciardo's praises, because he was given he finished 6th, starting from 6th, but he obeyed the team instructions. He let Norris through immediately. He didn't say, no, I can go faster. So I think in that sense, that's good, mature driving from Danny Rick.
The thing with Daniel Ricciardo, and it is brilliant mature driving from him, is Ricciardo at this current point in time doesn't realistically have any room to argue. He's new to the team. So it's kind of that thing of, I have to please this new team for them to potentially keep me on. And the one thing as well that Ricciardo said is that he has to swallow his pride and, obey orders when they come through. He did. They swapped, and it allowed Lando to get that 3rd place. So credit where credit's due to Ricciardo for taking it on the chin.
Yeah, but I think it's also fair to say that had Lando not shown the pace that he thought he had, McLaren would have swapped him back round. Absolutely,
they would have swapped him back.
Yeah, which is absolutely fine. We've seen that previously. P7 for Pierre Gasly, started 5th, finishing 7th. I think he had a really bad start to the race. Tyson, he started in the wet. He pitted far too late, so he just absolutely dropped through the field. He was P18 by the time he sorted his tyres out, but he has absolutely cracking second half of the race, going from 14th to 8th, and then later promoted to 7th. Tyson, your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a pretty good result, all things considered. Considering they got the strategy so wrong at the start by being on the wrong tyres.
Yeah, and I suspect there was some strong words exchanged, but I guess he had, as we said earlier on, he was sort of committed to.
Yeah, he was pretty much committed to that once they made the choice.
Yeah. Right. Position 8, Lance Stroll. Hodders, I'll come to you this one. Lance had a good solid race. Started 10th, finished 8th. Sort of did what everyone else did in terms of the tyres, going to the inters round about the halfway point. Finished 7th, however, he was demoted to 8th as a result of I think it was exceeding track limits and overtaking. An okay weekend for Lance. He's got points on the board for Aston Martin.
Exactly. Aston Martin getting points is a good start. If it weren't for the penalty, it's a pity. Would have got a couple more points in there. But overall, a relatively, I'd say, quiet weekend for him. He just did the job and got the job done well.
Absolutely. Okay, so position 9, Esteban Ocon. Tyson, I will come to you for the look at the Frenchman. So qualified 9th, finished 9th. He was one of 4 drivers to start on the wets. However, he took advantage of the early safety car, pitting for the Inters. Got to 13th by the time of the red flag. Passed his teammate Alonso for 10th on lap 41. Finished 10th, but he was promoted to 9th as a result of some of the penalties. So, beating his teammate, always a good start.
Yep. Always good to beat your teammate when they're a former champion.
Yeah, and speaking of former champions, position 10, Fernando Alonso started 15th, finishing 10th. Again, just a one-stop strategy. Prae, Fernando had a bit of an eventful race, to say the least. He spun off on the way to the grid on the installation lap. Just slightly dropped a few places, and then after the red flag, he came alive, finished 11th, and then promoted to P10. So a fairly good race for Fernando, would you say?
Yeah, I think the junior is doing quite good. No, Alonso is doing good. I think he's finally getting back into the groove of the car after being away from Formula One for a little bit. And it's kind of nice to see him finally pick up a point for Alpine. So hopefully he can continue this. But it's a case of, was it because of the red flag, or was it off of his own merit? Who knows?
Indeed, I think some drivers were obviously able to take advantage of that red flag reset. Some
red flag was a game changer, I think, in that race.
It's a massive
was
game
a game changer.
Absolutely.
And it's specifically because they did a rolling start, not a standing start. If it was a standing start, I think it would have been a lot different.
I think that's actually a really good point there. And we'll very quickly cover it here. So normally after a red flag, the race is restarted from a standing start. However, Michael Massey, the race director, chose to do a rolling start, and I think that was because there was a mix of dry and wet patches on the starting grid. So for safety reasons, he's decided to go with the safety car restart. So double points finish for Alpine, always a good way to finish it off. Right, let's have a look at those who didn't quite make it into the points. Sergio Perez, P11, having started from the front row. Hodders, will come to you for this one. Set the fastest time in qualifying too. Had a bit of a sloppy start, dropped to P4. He then committed the cardinal sin of overtaking behind the safety car, so he got a 10-second penalty. When he served his penalty, he had to change not just the wheels that are on the front and the back of the car, but also his steering wheel. Resumed the race, position 4, spun off on lap 38 just after the restart. He dropped all the way to P14. Just a miserable race for the Mexican.
After last time, it just was not his day, was it? He had a good weekend, then all those spins and pure bad luck and poor judgment. I think he'll want to write that one off and just wait for the next race now.
Absolutely, we'll see what happens for Checo in Portugal. Another person who's gone from a good race to a really bad one. P12 Yuki Tsunoda. Tyson, I'll come to you on this one. Crashed out in Q1. Actually, he did not qualify. Didn't even set a time. P15, when the safety car was deployed at the end of the first lap, got up to 10th at the red flag. Unfortunately, first lap we go green. He spins off, throwing away all that hard work. He finished 13, got promoted to P12, despite the fact that he actually got a 5-second penalty for track limits violation. So as good as his race was in Bahrain, it was the complete opposite here at Imola.
Yeah, we've been singing his praises, but I think this one was just a weekend to forget, really.
Yeah, and they can, Yuki, a new driver's for one, he's going to know that these races are going to happen, but you've got to take the rough with the smooth, and I'm sure he'll learn from these mistakes,
Yeah,
which is fine.
hopefully he'll be able to bounce back from it.
Yeah, we hope so. Prae, let's have a look at the Flying Finn. Kimi Räikkönen finishing P13, qualified 16th. He had a cracking start, jumping 4 places. He was up to 8th at the red flag. Unfortunately, had a safety car restart infringement. So he's got himself a 30-second time penalty at the end of the race. He actually finished 9th in the points, but this penalty has walloped him all the way down to 13th.
Yeah, And the one thing that Raikkonen has kind of shown here is that the Iceman still has it. He still definitely has it to get that jump at the start, but that safety car infringement for someone like Raikkonen, she shouldn't be making those types of mistakes. So,
and we'll go into
shame
more.
To see it happen.
Yeah, and we'll go into more detail on that because it is quite it's a rare one. It's certainly one I've not seen for
It's
a
the
while.
first time I've seen a 30-second time penalty for safety car infringements.
Yeah, which we'll go into in a bit more. Hodders will have a look at Raikkonen's teammate Antonio Giovinazzi. Started 17th, finished 14th, one-stop strategy. Again, like his teammate, 4 places up at the start. He was up to P11 at the red flag. Had to pit on lap 40 with some sort of brake problem. Mechanics fixed that fairly quickly, which dropped him all the way down towards the back. An okay weekend, I guess, for Antonio?
I think by Antonio's standards, it was an okay race. It wasn't disastrous. It wasn't fantastic. Decidedly average.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, yeah, we always say that the first person you've got to beat is your teammate. Giovinazzi, he's more or less there. He's keeping up with the flying fin, which is good work. So let's have a look at Sebastian Vettel, P15. Another horrible race for the 4-time world champion. Holders come to this one. So he started from the pit lane after a brake problem. He then got a penalty for not having his tyres fitted before the start. He was up to 15th at the red flag and then retired late on with a gearbox problem. Just an awful race for Seb.
Vettel's just not had a good first 2 weeks, has he? I mean, he had a poor race last time, then this time around, he's just not having his luck at the moment, is he?
Mm-hmm. And how does he
need?
That's
bad for Vettel, though. That's a very, very bad thing for Vettel, though, because he needs to prove himself, and he's not doing that. It's twice. He needs to start improving, or else I have a feeling it could potentially be a firing mid-season.
So, Prae, it's a good point there, actually, Prae, because, Aston Martin have brought in a 4-time world champion, someone who's driven for Ferrari as well as Red Bull. He is supposed to be setting the standard at the team, and at the moment he is being beaten convincingly in both qualifying and the race by Lance Stroll. Prae, do you think Aston Martin could take that measure of firing Seb mid-season?
Potentially, because I genuinely think Vettel's past his prime. I don't think... I honestly don't see him being in F1 potentially after this season or going into 2022. He's just too past his prime. I mean, his last season as well, he had that problem, but that was obviously a different story. That was... Ferrari had that infringement against them that their engines, the engines needed to be a lot slower as a penalty, but that was against Ferrari as a whole. But you would have thought that because Vettel has a better car this season, or that he's in a car that could potentially suit him more, he would do better. 2 weeks, 2 races. And in my mind, for Vettel, 2 failures. I think it's getting to the point now. If he doesn't start shaping up, I think Aston Martin's going to take action.
Okay. Well, let us know, everyone, what you think in the comments section below. Is this Vettel's last season? Could we see a mid-season firing? Let's get back to the result. 16th, Mick Schumacher. Hodders, I'm going to come to you on this one. Schumacher qualified 18th, finished P16. Had a bizarre spin under the safety car at the start. Had to go around for nearly 2 laps whilst the pit lane entry was cleared up. P19 at the restart. He's managed to pass his teammate Mazepin despite being about 40 seconds off at the restart. Got to P16 at the red flag, and they just had a quiet race throughout. What do we think of Schumacher's race?
I mean, again, he was As he spoke towards the back with his Haas teammate, he's finishing at least. I mean, he's finished his first 2 races, which for a Schumacher is a good statistic for your first season out. But despite his mistakes, he's still capable, and at least he finished.
Yeah, that's good. And you think he finished a good 30, 40 seconds ahead of his teammate, Nikita Mazepin, who made it to the finish, Tyson. We'll have a quick look at his race result. Qualified 19th, but that was I think had Tsunoda not had his problem, obviously Mazepin would have been taking up the back. Started on the wets, and he basically had a quiet race throughout, and he was running last throughout. So, but he's getting to the finish, I guess.
Yeah, he finished. Congratulations.
He did unfortunately have quite a few incidents. He sort of tagged Latifi at the start, although I don't think that was really his problem.
I would give him credit where it's due. That wasn't really his fault.
No, as we'll discuss in a minute,
Exactly,
his fault. But
yeah.
But the spin towards the end, which was quite well caught on the curb cam, was
He
quite
doesn't disappoint.
Yeah, go on, Prae.
Sorry, there was actually something as well that I found quite funny. It was from Gunther, that, and if I recall correctly, it was Mazepin needs to stop thinking this car is a Merc, because I believe there was a testing that Mazepin got to test the Merc.
Interesting.
Or something like that.
Okay.
So he's coming back into the Haas, and he needs to stop thinking that it's the Merc, because maybe he's pushing it too much. Maybe that's why he's spinning quite a lot. And it could potentially be the same for Schumacher, because Schumacher recently was testing the Ferrari, the one that they have now. He was in that car just recently as well. So maybe both of them have set their expectations of the car too high, and they need to just dial it back.
That's a good point there. Very good point. Right. On to the main, or one of the main talking points. Tyson, will come to you. So the 2 retirements of Valtteri and George. So we'll go through Bottas first. Qualified 8th. Poor qualifying by his standard. Dropped 10th at the start. He was passed by Gasly. And then hit by Russell. For Russell, he qualified 12th, so superb qualifying. He was 10th for most of the race until he collided with Bottas. Bottas, first and foremost, the collision aside, he had a poor weekend regardless.
Yeah, just a miserable weekend. It's not really what you expect to see from someone driving a Mercedes.
And as for George Russell, again, missed the Saturday, but it looked like he was on course to convert that Saturday performance into a strong points result.
Once again, he was doing really well, but Russell just seems to have this thing. He gets in a position where it's his big moment. It's a clip for the highlight reel, and he just balls it. It is starting to become very frequent now.
I mean, there are some occasions when it's his fault, sometimes it's his mechanic's fault at the pit stop, and sometimes it's just sheer bad luck.
Babies.
And lastly, Hodders, let's look at Nicholas Latifi, who had his best qualifying to date, started 14th. But unfortunately, he ran wide on the uphill into the second sector, rejoined, and then unfortunately clipped by Mazepin straight into the wall.
It just was not his Sunday afternoon at all. To have all those and then be clipped down by Mazepin and then to spin out sector 2. It's just not on, is it?
Yeah, just a little bit unfortunate there, but. Yeah, not much can be helped there. Okay, so that's the result. So let's go to the steward's office. We've got a lot of penalties from this weekend. So Sergio Perez's penalty, so overtaking under safety car, which is a big no. So this is what the stewards had to say. So Perez skid off the track in the wet conditions during the safety car period. Upon rejoining the track, he then passed the two cars that had proceeded on the track past the point of his incident, which I think were Ricardo and Sainz, I want to say, but I can't remember. Past the point of incident, which he was not entitled to, and that's a 10-second time penalty, plus two extra penalty points. Hodders, we know, overtaking under yellow flags, with the exception, very rare exceptional circumstances, it's a big, big no-no. You don't do it.
It is very simple. It is something that you just do not do. No way, no how. Except, as you mentioned, those very, very rare circumstances. Perez committed the error and he's paid the price.
But I think also, is there something there that his team should have perhaps said to him, look, you need to give those two places back, otherwise we're looking at a penalty?
Agreed. It's similar to when we had the, as has been done to death, the incident at Bahrain a few weeks ago when Max had an unfair advantage on the corner and he gave it back. You need that courtesy system almost.
Good point there. So the next one, Sebastian Vettel. And again, this is a rare one that's come up. Prae will come to you this time. So the tyres not fitted at the 5-minute signal. The rear wheels of car 5 not fitted at the 5-minute mark. The stewards applied a mandatory penalty of a 10-second stop-go. Prae, I think it's worth putting just a bit of meat onto the bones on this one. So there was a brake problem for both Aston Martins before the start. The team at the 5-minute signal, they were still working on the car, still working on the brakes, and then they decided to wheel him into the pit lane. They then fitted the rear tyres with 4 minutes to go. Prae, that is unfortunately a slam dunk.
It doesn't matter where the car is on the grid. It could be on. It doesn't matter where the car is. It could be on the grid, in the pit lane, in the garage. If the tyres are not on at the 5-minute signal, is a 10-second stop go, and they make it clear because at the same time, within that 5 minutes, everyone's got to be prepped and ready to get off the grid. Now, if that tyres are going on and they're potentially still working on the car, that means that car is late and that puts the schedule out of whack. So they just need to be on at that 5-minute signal and the team's ready to get the hell off the grid.
As I understand the rules from the FIA technical delegate, Joe Bauer, I think basically what they should have done is they should have made the decision before the 5-minute signal that Vettel was going to start from pit lane, and then said to Joe, look, we've got a problem with the brakes here. This is a safety issue. So they said, okay, that's fine. You're starting from the pit lane. And then you wouldn't have had to have had the tyres fitted at that point. But it's because the Aston Martin team made the decision too late, because he was on the grid at the 5-minute signal when the tyres weren't fitted. That's why he's got the penalty. If they'd have said, say, 6 minutes to go, we're going to start from pit lane, that would have been fine. He basically could have been fitting the tyres in his garage as they were doing the formation lap. But
As well, maybe that Aston Martin has underlying issues, because both, I'm looking at production notes here, both Stroll and Vettel had gearbox issues during the race. So, something wrong with Aston Martin here?
Let's hope it's not a recurring issue, because as you mentioned, with the gearbox retirement that Vettel had, I think, if my memory serves me correctly, because the gearbox hasn't completed 6 full events, that will be a gearbox penalty going to Portugal. Let's hope not.
A 5-place grid penalty.
Yeah, 5. It'll be 5 place first time, but let's wait and see. We'll get that one confirmed. Tyson, I'll come to you for the next one. Yuki Tsunoda exceeding track limits. We did our VSC podcast a couple of weeks ago on track limits, and it's good to see the FIA are policing it. Unfortunately, Yuki Tsunoda left the track on multiple occasions without a justifiable reason. A 5-second time penalty and a 1 penalty point applied to his licence. Fairly slam dunk, that one.
Yeah, I think we've said enough about the track limits thing over the past few weeks, and yeah, fair penalty.
And that's the next one. So Lance Stroll got a post-race penalty. So this is a rather complicated one. Hodders, I'll come to you in a minute on this one. So the stewards conclude that car 18, which was Lance Stroll, was not able to complete his pass on car 10, Pierre Gasly, at turns 2 to 3 without leaving the track and completely shortcutting turn 3 and returning on the track ahead of Gasly. He then failed to give the position back. In hearing from the drivers, the stewards accepted that car 18 was ahead of car 10 at the point he left the track, but that he was not able to complete the manoeuvre given the wet conditions. Again, this is one where both the driver and the team have failed on this one. Lance Stroll knew, he must have known he had to give that place back, but also his team must have noticed, hang on, you've cut across the track, because we've seen the video footage of it. He's cut across the track, let him back, because you're going to get a penalty anyway. Hodders, this is just poor from Aston Martin.
It's very much poor. We can safely say it's a collective failure on both sides of Aston Martin. Lance knew he'd gained an advantage and should have given it back, just as the done thing. But it was a collective failure because his team did not give the instruction, give up that space. They should have clicked that immediately, and they failed to do so.
Absolutely. Tyson, this is a bit of concern with Aston Martin that they are... If you look at the penalties that they've picked up for the sort of track infringements, if you like, Bahrain and this weekend, surely someone like Lawrence Stroll needs to be turning around to the manager and say, hey, hang on, this isn't on. These are basic errors.
Yeah, and especially considering all the controversy there was over Lewis and Max giving that position back, you would think someone would have said something.
It may well have been covered in the race director's briefing with the drivers. And the last one, this is the one that is causing a lot of confusion. So I'll read what the stewards decided, and then I'll read what the rule actually says in the sporting reg. So on the lap before the restart following the race suspension, Raikkonen spun at turn 3. Article 42.6 indicates that the driver may retake his position so long as he does so prior to the first safety car line, SC1. At first, the team instructed him to do so, but then told him to hold his position. Article 42.6 then indicates that should a driver fail to retake his position, he must enter the pit lane and can only rejoin the race once the whole field has passed the pit exit. Now, he's failed to enter the pit lane when he should have done so. That's a 10-second stop-go penalty and 2 penalty points. Because it's applied after the race, it's a 30-second time penalty. And the rule on this is very, very clear indeed. Any driver is delayed when leaving his position in the fast lane or during the laps behind the safety car may overtake to re-establish his original starting position, providing he does so before safety car line 1 on the lap the safety car comes in. If he fails to do so, has to go into the pit lane and may rejoin the race once the whole field has passed the end of the pit lane after the race resumed. A penalty under Article 38.3d, which is the 10-second stop-go penalty, will be imposed on any driver who fails to re-enter the pit lane. Prae, 25 years of watching F1, I've never come across this. It is complicated, but equally very clear-cut.
It's very clear. You can't argue with it, really. And of course, it was applied after the race because it wasn't served. I think that's what it was. Raikkonen never served it.
I think it was because the stewards applied it, or they investigated it and then applied it after the race. I think had it been imposed during the race, you'd have had the 3 laps to serve it. Hodders, I'll come to you. We have seen a lot of penalties both this weekend and at Bahrain where both the driver and the team could have avoided this penalty being imposed. Hodders.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I was in deep thought there. Anyway, I think again it is mind blowing these first 2 races when there's been plenty of time to read through the rules. I would think, including any rule changes, that both drivers and teams are collectively failing to abide by those rules. You'd think by now they'd have them pretty much ingrained in their minds.
Mm-hmm. And Tyson, given how close we are seeing the battles all the way down the field, if teams and drivers don't get their act together, they are going to cost serious points and serious prize money.
Yeah, indeed. I think in this case there was a bit of confusion because of the Perez situation earlier in the race where he got penalised for taking his place back after he went off track. So maybe Alpha saw that and thought, No, keeping behind.
That's a good point. That may well have caused the confusion. Okay, so leave the stewards in their office. Let's have a look at the winners and spinners. I don't know what's happened there, so let's just reveal the whole lot. So we'll go through the winners first. Max Verstappen, a clear and obvious one. Our driver of the day, faultless race and a faultless weekend, really. I think he was less than a tenth behind Hamilton in qualifying. We'll look at the other one, Lando Norris, who we've mentioned, had a near perfect weekend. Carlos Sainz, we didn't really talk much about going through driver. Hodders, Carlos Sainz, a really good weekend, actually. Good, solid weekend.
Exactly. I mean, he wasn't fighting for lead at any point, but again, a fine finish and just a generally solid weekend throughout. Consistent, I think, is the word that springs to mind, and that's what we want to see.
Absolutely. It's what Ferrari fans are wanting at the moment. On the flip side, we'll get into this in a bit more detail, but Prae, George Russell is one of our spinners this week. A good qualifying, but he's completely undone it.
Yeah, 100%. He got angry at the incident that happened, but it was 100% on his fault. Went a little bit too wide, lost control of the car. That's on him. Bottas was only a passenger in that collision.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some light to the situation. It was a Williams catching up to a Merc.
Yeah.
Which is something, if you told me in like 2017 or 2018 or something like that would be happening, then I'd say you're joking. But who knows at this point?
And I think respect to George, because he did apologise for both the incident and his conduct afterwards, and obviously he's spoken to Toto Wolff about it as well. Tyson Perez, having been driver of the day for the Formula One fans the previous weekend, he's had an absolute stinker at Imola.
Yeah, just didn't have a good race at all.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, Hodders, Yuki Tsunoda, he was our driver of the day 2 weeks ago. He's one of our spinners this week.
He is, but at the same time, I'd like to say that he, as we said at the beginning of the season, he will learn. He has learned this weekend. I mean, even after he had a very good performance in Bahrain, he was still self-critical. And if he was self-critical, then I'm sure he'll have been rather kicking himself over Imola. But he will learn and improve and learn from this weekend.
We hope so, fingers crossed. Right, let's have a look at the talking point. And I think let's just get straight down to business. The collision between Valtteri Bottas and George Russell. So, as we mentioned, lap 31, Russell tries to pass Bottas, going around the outside into turn 1, position 9 at stake. Bottas goes to cover the inside line. Russell tries to go around the outside. There is room for manoeuvre. Russell clips the white line and the grass with his right-hand side tyre, spears into Bottas, causing a huge accident and eventually resulting in the race being suspended. Who should I come to first? Hodders, I'll come to you first. First and foremost, who are we predominantly blaming anyone? Is it a racing incident? What are your thoughts?
I think it was a racing incident, because it's already been discussed. I think, I don't like to use the term blame, but I think that the culpability in the incident, because it sounds a lot better than blame in my view, I think the culpability does lie with George Russell. And I think post-race as well, he admitted as such, and despite his initial annoyance and trying to, both of them effing and blinding, I think Russell, at least shaking on the chin a bit, it was his mess up, and he will learn from it.
And that's a good point that you make afterwards. Prae, I think probably the worst bit for me out of this was not actually the collision itself, but Russell storming up to Bottas and slapping him on the head. That's a no-no.
No, it's a no-no. You kind of need to be You really need to be sportsmanlike in this industry, but having that I mean, you're acting like that to a driver who is on the team that you want to get on.
And it's more
No.
also, and I think also it's more the fact that that crash was so big that they had to actually put the medical car out as well. So doing that, I mean, okay, Bottas's gesture wasn't great either, but if someone's had a big accident like that, slapping them on the head, you don't know what sort of injuries there could be. So for me, that's a big no. Yes, Russell has apologised, but I suspect there were strong words said between Toto Wolff and the two drivers. Tyson, quite clearly, there is we are now seeing in its raw elements the battle for a Mercedes seat next year. Is Russell's reaction something we could expect from him if he gets to drive for Mercedes, or is this a one-off?
I would like to think that it's a one-off, and it was very much a heat-of-the-moment situation, because he felt kind of hard done by that Bottas kind of moved over, which he may have thought put him onto the grass. I do think most of it does end up on Russell, but he was very mature to apologise afterwards and admit that it was his fault.
Indeed. The next talking point, and it's one that we've all, we're all rubbing our hands and smiling, is one Hamilton versus Verstappen, round 2. And Prae, as we discussed, Hamilton is not infallible.
Not at all. Verstappen's shown over the first 2 races that he is capable of bringing it to Merc and bringing it to Hamilton, especially in this race when he actually won the whole Grand Prix. Kind of shows something's definitely changed at Merc, or something's absolutely improved at Red Bull.
It could be a mix of the two. Hodders, that sort of battle from the start into turn 1, really, really good from both drivers. I think, yes, Hamilton thought he might squeeze him, but didn't make too much of an issue out of it. And the look on Hamilton's face afterwards is not only has he made a good travel drive, it's like, yeah, I really enjoyed that battle.
Absolutely. We've had 2 races, we've had 2 very, very fine battles. Granted, Bahrain was a little closer and there are fewer instances, but I think Lewis will be very happy with that performance. He was competitive, and I think it was only fair that Max got some honours for in this situation, but I think Lewis Hamilton will be very happy with that battle, and it was very enjoyable at this end.
And obviously, if a very important part of this battle is going to seem to be throughout, not just how the drivers race, but the pit stops. A very, very crucial error from the Mercedes pit crew when Hamilton stopped to change from inters onto the dry tyres. Sticky right tyre, it cost him 1.5 seconds. It looks like that might have cost him the lead.
Absolutely, it was just one of those. I mean, nobody wants a sticking point. We've had a couple of issues, I think, where I think we had a few issues like back in Bahrain as well, where it just seemed like that front right tyre has proven to be a right pain in the neck for pit crews at the moment. They really need to do a bit of practice on that one, particularly when it's costing 2 seconds, which in Formula One is a very, very long time.
I say it could be something to do with mechanics. It could be just the actual tyre guns. We'll hope that doesn't impede the title battle. Speaking of the title battle, Tyson, we have got an absolute belter of a championship battle on our hands. If the first 2 rounds are anything to go by, this is going to go all the way to Abu Dhabi.
Yep, and I can't wait for it because this is exactly what the sport's needed. Hamilton's good, but he's had it all his own way for the past few years. He's needed a challenger. Now he's got one.
And if this is to be Hamilton's final year, as has previously been discussed, this might be the one where he's really got to fight the hardest for.
Could very well be his best earned.
Yeah, and I think it will take pride of place on his mantelpiece if indeed he does become world champion at the end of the season. Right. The final bit of our talking points is the grid battle, and my, it just seems there seems to be sort of, from what I can perceive, 6 sort of mini battles. There's the battle between sort of Alfa Romeo and Williams to basically stay off the back row. So Alfa Romeo and Williams as well to stay off the back row. There's the battle of trying to get through to Q2. There's the teams trying to avoid being eliminated in qualifying 1. And equally, there's the battle to get into Q3 versus avoiding Q2 elimination. And then there's the battle for pole. Hodders, it is so close between every team. And it's literally just the slightest mistake here or there, and a team could qualify further ahead than they would expect, or equally, they could qualify a lot further back than they would expect.
We are seeing some very, very slim margins where one mistake can change everything. And I will say, having returned from not watching Formula One properly for a number of years, it's actually really, as a viewer, very enjoyable to see that it is tight, that no matter what team you're on, you have a chance.
Absolutely. Prae, it used to be cases where some rows would be separated by a couple of tenths of a second. It's now all the way down the grid. It's being separated by hundredths, if not thousandths of a second.
No, and it's really nice to kind of see this battling going back and forth between the teams. The midfield is almost as strong as the front runners. So it could potentially become one of the closest midfields that we've ever seen. And sometimes in F1, the midfield is the most entertaining part.
Absolutely. And Tyson, we could see, not necessarily if a Mercedes and a Red Bull made a big mistake. It could be something really, really small, and we could see something like a McLaren or a Ferrari on pole position, which that'd be great for the sport.
Yeah, slim margins between all of them, and we saw last year you can get someone unexpected on the podium. So don't write off anybody who's just feels like they're in a midfield car, like a McLaren or a Ferrari.
Absolutely. Yeah, very keen indeed. Right, so let's take a look at the championship standings after 2 rounds. Hamilton leads Verstappen by 1 point, 44 plays for 43. Norris on 27, Leclerc 20. And then a good tight midfield scrap there between Bottas on 16, Sainz and Ricciardo on 14, Perez 10, Gasly 6, Stroll on 5. Tsunoda and Ocon a couple of points apiece, and Alonso off the mark on 1 point. 7 drivers all classified but haven't yet picked up a point. We look at the Constructors' Championship. Mercedes lead Red Bull 60 points to 53, McLaren on 41, Ferrari on 34, AlphaTauri on 8, Aston Martin on 5, and Alpine with their double points finish on 3. Alfa Romeo, Williams, and Haas failing to score. So coming up next weekend, in fact, is the Portuguese Grand Prix at Portimao. The weekend after, we'll have the Double Waved Yellows podcast. That same weekend, we've got the Spanish Grand Prix, so a busy weekend for everyone. And the weekend after that, we will have the Spanish Grand Prix. So let's go through some final thoughts, Hodders. Final thoughts after another eventful race and 2 rounds into the championship.
Well, the first one that springs to mind is bring on round 3. If the first 2 rounds ready to go off, you never know what could happen in Portugal. Watch this space.
Absolutely. And Prae, it's not obviously just the front of the grid that we're watching, but it's all across the midfield and down the back as well.
It's, as I said before, it's spread across the entire grid, and it's really good to see Williams now finally starting to get into that midfield battle, which is very, very nice. The Ferraris becoming competitive again, so a lot of things to look forward to.
And Tyson, could we potentially see a surprise result in Portugal? Williams scoring points, a Ferrari or Aston Martin on the podium at Portugal?
It's very possible. It's been a really good first 2 races. For my money, this has been the best start to a season since maybe 2012, when we had 7 different winners in 7 different races.
Yeah, I remember that. That was a great season.
Goes like this.
Oh, that was a great season, a very fun season for all F1 fans. So if we get something that's half as good as that, then we've got a lot to look forward to. Time to wrap it up. My thanks to Hodders, to Prae, and to Tyson for joining us for the podcast. My thanks to you for listening and for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave us a comment below in the post. We'll be back next week for the Portuguese Grand Prix for myself and everyone in the commentary box. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time. Take care. Yeah, which is fair enough. Position 8 for Lando Stroll. I'm going to come to you on Lando. He started 10th.
Lando.
Whoops.
Lando Stroll.
Blooper. Start again.
Merry Christmas, Dennis Norden.